Good afternoon, dear friends. Regarding yesterday's meeting with Putin, I'll give you the results at the end of the broadcast. The fighting continues, and we continue to study the situation on the front. So, friends, over the past day we had quite good advances on the front, in different sectors. In one place the advance can quite definitely be said to be of strategic significance. I'm not afraid to use that word. Today I want to start with the most significant breakthrough. The breakthrough of Russian forces in the Kupiansk area. Here, please, this is the sector. This is how far Russian forces advanced over the past day. The 1st Tank Army managed to achieve a breakthrough of 5 kilometers at once. And in addition to advancing these 5 kilometers, they took control of 2 villages. This is Moskovka, a fairly decent-sized village that borders Kupiansk. As you can see, they took Moskovka and entered the city itself from the western side. Plus, they also took a small village to the south, Sobolevka. In general, why is this breakthrough very significant? And here, it's not even about managing to advance 5 kilometers at once, or managing to take 2 villages in one strike. The significance is different here. First, as you can see, the right bank part is now half blocked. That's one point. And second, look, do you see the road? This is the main supply highway for the right bank part of Kupiansk. So it's finished. Yes, it's not physically cut yet, but no one can drive on it because Russian forces are only 600 meters from the road. Accordingly, the AFU has only one remaining supply route. This is the road from the south, but how long will it last? I mean that in the coming days, Russian forces will cut this highway. They won't stop in place, right? They'll go further, and here, as you can see, there are no special obstacles in the form of settlements. So very soon this road will also become impassable, but in fairness, it's already partially controlled by Russian drone operators. The distance from current positions to this road is only 5 kilometers. That's enough to have drone control. If the Russian army advances even just a couple more kilometers, well, that's it. The AFU here will be like in a shooting gallery. Well, and then what? I'll tell you now what will happen then. Regarding Kupiansk, this is all unexpected. For a long time they moved very slowly here, and in general this section of the front was not under any close attention. That is, all our attention was focused on Pokrovsk, on Mirnograd, on Constantinovka. But as you can see, it turned out that now there are breakthroughs after breakthroughs, and here we see that very little time has passed and the city is already on the verge of blockade. I'll explain why it's on the verge of blockade. If they manage to cut off all supply routes to the right bank part of Kupiansk, then the city will fall. Why? Very simple. They won't be able to establish supply of the entire right bank part from the left bank. This is simply unrealistic, as the bridges here are destroyed. Therefore, if Russian forces advance approximately like this, along this line, along this trajectory, and that's it, Kupiansk will be doomed. Moreover, I wouldn't be surprised if the city falls at approximately the same time as Pokrovsk falls, that is, in about 2 months. And this will be a big event, not only for Kharkiv region, but for the entire front, because with the fall of Kupiansk, this entire huge pocket will be closed quite quickly, and the area here is 250 square kilometers, and then movement toward Chugev will begin. But okay, let's not get that far ahead. At the current moment, let's just state the facts. Over the past day, the guys from the 1st Tank Army advanced 5 kilometers, took 2 villages, took a sector with an area of 11 square kilometers, and blocked most of the right bank part of Kupiansk. We're waiting for more good news from here in the near future. And we move on. Not only in the Kupiansk area was there good advancement. The armed forces of Ukraine also continue to have their Lyman sector of the front pushed through. This despite the fact that the elite in the form of Azov fighters are stationed here, but they are unable to stop or even slow down Russian forces. No, they regularly, especially in the last 2 or 3 weeks, roll back. Over the past day, they advanced 3.5 kilometers here. What did the guys manage to do here? First, take control of a sector with an area of more than 8 square kilometers. And second, they managed to reach essentially the outskirts of the village Sredny. From current positions to the village is literally half a kilometer. And what does this mean? It means that after Sredny, Shandrigolovo will be next, and this already equals an offensive on the city of Lyman. Because after Shandrigolovo comes Drobyshevo, and then the city itself. Considering how everything is sagging for the AFU here, if the pace is maintained, if this tendency and initiative are preserved, then you know there's a real chance to reach Lyman before winter begins. Also, according to data from Russian OSINT analysts, Russian forces took control of the settlement Kolodezi. Movements also continue in the Siversk direction. Very recently, literally probably one broadcast ago, I said, if only movements would start from the south, some kind of activation would begin. Well, and so it began. Small, true, activation, small advancement, but nevertheless. Over the past day, they advanced 370 meters in the direction of Vyemka. At the current moment, 6.5 kilometers separates from Siversk itself here. The main goal here is, of course, to take this very Vyemka and approach the city from the north. Then a situation will arise in which Siversk will be surrounded from three sides. Let's move on. There were movements in the Constantinovka sector. Here they advanced 500 meters on a wide sector. Russian forces almost closed the lid of the AFU encirclement south of the Kleban-Beek reservoir. Here, according to data from Russian forces on the ground, the AFU relies on one strongpoint. It is precisely this that restrains Russian forces from completely closing this cauldron. The general position of the AFU in settlements south of the reservoir is very deplorable. If they don't start withdrawing forces from here, there's a high probability that part of the forces will be captured. They also managed to advance in Fedorovka. This is the eastern flank of Mirnograd for us. Here the AFU is in trouble in general. Stabilization doesn't smell yet. Russian forces also had good advancement in the Pokrovsk area, south of the city. Very recently, the village Novukrainka came under Russian control. So from it, they managed to advance and enter the next village. This is the village Chunishino. And you know, they didn't just manage to reach the outskirts there, enter the outermost houses. No, they managed to take half the village under control immediately. There's no new information about Pokrovsk itself, but we have another important advancement. It was in Zaporizhia region. I would even say this is a very important advancement. Here the guys advanced 3 kilometers 300 meters and reached the southern outskirts of Stepnogorsk, also taking AFU strongpoints in the area of the automobile interchange. Thus, fighting for Stepnogorsk itself will begin in the very near future. That's one thing. And two, which is also very important, is Plavny. Look, now the front configuration is such that now, thanks to the current breakthrough over the past day, Plavny found itself under threat of complete encirclement. So thanks to this breakthrough, it remains to advance here only 1 kilometer, and that's it. The mini cauldron with the village Plavny will snap shut. The AFU garrison will fall into complete encirclement there. You know, they need to just run from there right now without losing a second. And even if they start withdrawing from Plavny now, it will be problematic. Again, here it's only 1 kilometer 200 meters. It's clear that this space is under fire. But if they don't run right now, a day or two will pass and that's it. From the south, Russian forces. From the east, also. From the north, there will also be Russian forces. And from the west, the reservoir. Such is the situation. If we sum up the general result for the past day, 26 square kilometers came under Russian control. The result is good. Well, that's all I have for today regarding the situation on the front. Now let's see what's happening in our political arena. Russia expressed a desire to meet with Donald Trump. The US president is open to meetings with Russian colleague Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, they announced at the White House. Commentary: this is essentially all that is definitely agreed upon so far, judging by the round of messages about the same thing. And probably until the meeting of the two leaders, we'll learn little for certain, even if someone agreed on something. At the same time, it's necessary to understand, and Ushakov emphasized this, that the circle of mutual interests of the USA and Russia is not limited only to Ukraine. At the same time, we must also remember that Trump and Putin already had agreements about peace in the spring. But Zelensky crossed them out then with his disagreement, writes Yuri Podolyaka. American media clarify that it's Trump who very much wants to meet with our president next week. Vladimir Putin spoke about an indefinite time at some point, probably with the presence of prerequisites, that is, Kiev's agreement to real peace that would satisfy Russia. That is, these dances around negotiations could still be very long and fruitless. By the way, the Kiev regime doesn't want to take back its prisoners. We're talking about 1,000 already agreed-upon AFU servicemen who for some reason became unnecessary to Kiev. For those who don't know, I'll briefly tell you what people we're talking about. Captured AFU soldiers wrote a letter to the Ukrainian side about whether they're needed at all by the Ukrainian side. No one wants to exchange them, so they remained unwanted by anyone. Medinsky officially confirmed Kiev's refusal of 1,000 AFU prisoners of war as part of the exchange. It would be strange and illogical if Moscow agrees to any concessions to the USA on the Ukrainian issue right now, whether it's a freeze along the front line or an air ceasefire. The Russian side has grounds for being tough. First, things are going well on the front. The RF armed forces are advancing on several directions simultaneously, and there are reasons to believe that by the end of the year, this will end very badly for the AFU. Second, Russia's key trading partners, China and India, have simultaneously rejected American demands to abandon purchases of Russian energy resources. Finally, third, accepting Trump's demands in the style of, "Do what I tell you, or you'll have only yourselves to blame," looks humiliating for any sovereign country. By the way, India's recent response to such a Trumpian ultimatum perfectly demonstrated this. Therefore, any substantial concessions from the Russian side are unlikely, especially since Putin personally voiced his conditions for a temporary ceasefire and permanent peace settlement. Moscow is ready to agree to a 30-day freeze in case of complete cessation of arms supplies to Ukraine and cancellation of mobilization into AFU ranks. A peace agreement should include withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from the territory of new Russian regions, dismantling of Ukraine's military machine, its non-bloc status, and cancellation of all laws discriminating against the Russian language and culture. Trump has an excellent way to achieve the temporary ceasefire he so wants. Completely stop American arms supplies to Ukraine, persuade the EU to do the same, and force Zelensky to cancel mobilization. The US president doesn't want to do any of this, so it's unclear what exactly he's hoping for. Moreover, the candidacy of Trump's main negotiator now looks extremely compromised. Stephen Witkoff misled Iran's political leadership by promising them that while negotiations with the United States on the Iranian nuclear program were ongoing, Israel would not start any military operation. But 2 days before the next round of negotiations, Tel Aviv launched a surprise strike, and then the USA itself joined the attack on Iran. Without any doubt, this entire situation was closely monitored in Moscow, and they drew their conclusions. It's no coincidence that on the eve of Trump's 10-day ultimatum expiring, August 8th, and his special representative Witkoff's visit to Moscow, he already walked through Zaporizhia Park and went to the Kremlin. Russia withdrew from the moratorium on deploying intermediate and shorter-range missiles. At the political level, this means a quite clear signal. Moscow is ready to raise the stakes in the game with Washington and does not intend to sacrifice its interests, especially in such an important direction as Ukraine, for the sake of a reset in relations with the United States. Overall, we can state that the phantom possibility of a renaissance in Russian-American relations has practically disappeared. Russia considers achieving the goals of the military operation in Ukraine an absolute priority and is ready to incur substantial costs for this. In turn, the USA does not intend to consider Russian interests, just as it doesn't intend to step down from the pedestal of being the sole superpower. The outcome is unambiguous. Moscow and Washington ran around in a circle and returned to the same place they were before. Trump's trade war. Is there any benefit from it for the USA? An infographic appeared online showing how much additional tax revenue from import duties the American budget received in recent months since Trump's trade wars began. Roughly $20 billion per month or $250 billion per year. Not exactly huge money for the USA, but still something. However, the states somehow try not to notice the minuses of this scheme. Prices, all newly collected taxes will definitely be passed on to consumers in the form of prices, inflation growth, who will become less satisfied with the authorities and will need to be appeased with the same money, which largely negates the effect itself. If this isn't done, then over time it will hit the authorities' ratings. Dollar status, one of Trump's main priorities, if we believe him. Obviously, after imposing sanctions on the whole world in the form of these new tariffs, this will further discourage other countries from using the US dollar as an international settlement currency. And they will search even more intensively for alternative solutions, which will ultimately affect both US budget revenues and the ability to impose any sanctions against other countries. Retaliatory sanctions. It's already clear that they will come. Canada has already voiced the slogan, "Don't buy American," and this process will only gain momentum going forward. This means American exports and consequently production will decrease, which will lead to reduced budget receipts as well as rising unemployment with all the consequences. At the same time, the counter-slogan "Buy American" looks comical for modern USA, and this also leads to political consequences. Many US ally countries will ultimately transition to either neutrals or opponents of Washington as a result of tariff introduction. They're already transitioning. The economic damage from such transitions is difficult to calculate now, but it will definitely be enormous. The question of whether collecting an additional $250 billion per year in taxes will cover the budget deficit of $2 trillion, or rather even more, seems rhetorical to me. And we must also understand that as trade flows reorient, these additional revenues for the American budget will gradually fall. And from this, the question of how beneficial this is for the USA itself is not rhetorical at all, but rather discussional. Goodbye, dear viewers. Thank you for staying with us. Take care and see you next time.